Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to go on a pretty fascinating, intimate exploration of the human mind. We're going to look at how our brains react to two completely opposite extremes, aimless downtime on one hand and intense, crushing stress on the other. And we'll see how both of these states, paradoxically, can actually be the birthplace of absolute genius. So let's dive right into this. Have you ever noticed how your most brilliant breakthroughs often happen when you're doing absolutely nothing? Like you're just standing in the shower or taking a quiet walk. But then, on the flip side, some of the most incredible, life-saving inventions in human history were forged under terrifying, crushing pressure. It kind of makes you wonder, right? How exactly can the brain be so creative in two totally opposite extremes? Well, here's the big idea we're unpacking today. The secret isn't really about dodging boredom, and it's definitely not about seeking out stress. It's all about self-awareness. It's about recognizing exactly what state your mind is in at any given moment, whether it's drifting aimlessly or pinned down by pressure, and intentionally leaning into that specific moment. If you can understand your state, you can absolutely harness its power. Okay, Act 1, the context. Let's look at the boredom paradox. The author of our source newsletter, who affectionately goes by Papa, notes that in quiet, drifting moments, his most creative ideas kind of just float in like leaves on a gentle stream. And you know what? There's actual hard science backing up Papa's floating leaves. It's something called the default mode network. Basically, when external stimulation drops, your attention networks quiet down. Your brain turns inward. It starts exploring distant memories and half-formed thoughts, actively searching for its own stimulation. It's like a giant puzzle, connecting dots that a busy, distracted mind would completely ignore. But here's the catch. Not all boredom is created equal. Researchers actually call this the shower effect. Studies show that freely moving thought during moderate, low-stimulation activities, we're talking walking the dog, folding laundry, or, taking a shower, strikes the perfect balance. If a task is completely frustratingly boring, it just makes you restless. What you really want is that sweet spot of moderate engagement, where your mind is gently constrained but totally free to wander. And this brilliantly illustrates a really common folk truth, perfectly captured by leadership coach Peter Bregman. He says, boredom creates the space, literally the window, for the magic to happen. But remember our big idea from earlier, self-awareness. Boredom only actually produces insight if we're aware enough to let our minds explore, rather than, reflexively picking up our phones to numb the quiet. Because we have to be honest, there's a very real danger to boredom when we lack that self-awareness, and that is complacency. Papa actually reflects on the biblical story of the Pharisees here. These were leaders so trapped in the monotony of their roles, so stuck in their old habits and puffed up with pride, that they were entirely stubbornly closed-minded to new truths. Without self-awareness, boredom doesn't lead to creativity. It just traps us in our own stubbornness and completely blinds us to fresh approaches. Which brings us to Act 2, the tension, the MacGyver secret. Now, what's really interesting is what happens when we pivot away from the quiet spaces of boredom to the absolute opposite extreme. Under severe stress, your brain's fight or flight response floods your body with hormones. And that wandering default mode network we just talked about, it aggressively shuts down. The brain abandons broad, dreamy thinking and laser focuses on survival. It relies on bricolage, which is the art of practical improvisation. It's creating rapid solutions by cleverly combining whatever random materials are immediately right in front of you. There is probably no better historical example of this than the Apollo 13 mission. With astronauts stranded in space and their oxygen failing, ground teams didn't sit around daydreaming to find an elegant, perfect solution. They were facing a literal life or death threat. So they gathered the scraps available on the ship, literally socks, plastic bags, duct tape, and built a highly functional carbon dioxide filter. It was raw, it was fast, and it was convergent thinking at its absolute finest. But we see this in our everyday lives too. Papa shares this great wisdom from his late father, Papa Q-Bear. When life pressed him hard, he didn't come up with dreamy, abstract ideas. He built what he playfully called Rube Goldberg solutions, these crazy, zigzagging fixes made from bits of string and old parts. Stress woke up his practical improvisation, practically forcing his mind to stitch together whatever lay close at hand just to get the job done. All right, moving to Act 3, the connection, two paths to creativity. So what does this all mean? How do we actually connect these two extremes to our own daily roadblocks? Well, think of your attention like a light source. Boredom acts like an open lantern. It casts this wide, gentle glow that illuminates the periphery, allowing for real, outside-the-box thinking. Stress, on the other hand, is an urgent laser. It's a fierce, cutting beam focused entirely on a single point, enabling highly tactical problem solving. They are both vital forms of creativity, but they run on entirely different fuels. But, and this is a big but, we have to be careful with the laser. While the fierce storm of acute stress forces you to inventively build shelter right now, staying in that gale for too long takes a massive biological toll. Prolonged chronic stress actively erodes your memory, damages your cognitive flexibility, and totally clouds your judgment. The creative spark doesn't just stall out, it gets actively extinguished. You literally cannot live in the storm forever. And finally, Act 4, the synthesis, harnessing your creative mind. So the crucial point here is having a self-awareness playbook. First things first, assess your state. If you're feeling stuck, give yourself the real gift of moderate boredom to generate divergent ideas. If you're facing an immediate crisis, trust your brain's incredible ability to harness acute stress for convergent bricolage. But most importantly, always guard against the complacency of closed-minded habits when you are bored, and know exactly when it is time to step out of the storm and seek calmer skies. As Papa so warmly puts it in his newsletter, whether you are relying on the quiet daydreaming of an open lantern or the frantic bricolage of the urgent laser, both ways let the mind weave scattered threads into a workable answer. Sure, sometimes it looks a little rough around the edges, but the human mind is a masterful, wonderfully adaptable creator. It truly gets the job done when it matters most. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on today. Look at your own daily habits and your own creative roadblocks. Are you intentionally designing your boredom to unlock your mind? Or are you just kind of sitting around trapped in old habits, just waiting for the storm of stress to force you to act? The choice and the awareness is entirely up to you. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.